The school bell rang, signaling the start of another busy day at Pine Valley School. The hallways echoed with the sound of students rushing to their classrooms, chattering excitedly about their plans for the weekend. But in one quiet corner of the school, something very different was happening. In Miss Walker's class, the students were taking their seats, pulling out their books, and getting ready for the lesson. As they settled in, the teacher smiled warmly and greeted them. But today, Miss Walker's eyes lingered for a moment on the corner of the classroom, where a small kitten had just been brought in by one of her students, a kind-hearted girl named Lena. Lena's face lit up as she gently placed the tiny kitten, which she had named Milo, on the floor by her desk. Milo, a fluffy orange kitten with big, scared eyes, looked around nervously. His tiny paws shuffled on the cold tile floor as he took in his new surroundings. Lena had found him outside the school gates that morning. He had been shivering and hungry, looking so helpless that Lena couldn't leave him there. She convinced Miss Walker to let him stay in class for the day, hoping the kitten would feel safer indoors. The other students gathered around to pet him, laughing and cooing at his tiny meows. But among all the smiles, there was one person who wasn't so happy about Milo's presence: Mr. Gray, the teacher's assistant. Mr. Gray, a tall, stern man, didn't hide his irritation when he saw the kitten. His face remained cold, his eyes narrowed in annoyance. The other teachers at the school thought he was a quiet, reserved man, but those who paid attention could see the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. The students noticed it too. When Mr. Gray looked at Milo, his jaw tightened. Lena, sitting at her desk with Milo curled up beside her, had no idea that the teacher's assistant was about to change everything. She watched as the kitten slowly started to nap, his little body rising and falling with each soft breath. But little did she know, she was about to witness something that would leave her heartbroken forever. As the bell rang for recess, the students rushed out of the classroom, eager to play outside. Lena, with her friends, ran into the hallway, laughing and chatting. But as they left, something felt off. Milo hadn't moved from his spot by her desk. He had always been curious and would usually follow her around when she stood up. This time, he stayed still, staring toward the teacher's desk. It was quiet, too quiet. Mr. Gray walked slowly toward the back of the classroom, a strange look in his eyes. He glanced over at the empty desks, making sure the students were all gone. Then, in the silence of the classroom, the cruelty inside him began to show. The door closed softly behind him. Milo, still by the desk, looked up at Mr. Gray. His tiny, innocent eyes were filled with confusion, but also fear. He could sense that something was wrong. Mr. Gray, his eyes darkening with frustration, knelt down and picked up the kitten roughly. Milo let out a small, scared meow, his body trembling as the man held him too tightly. "Milo, stay still," Mr. Gray growled under his breath. He squeezed the kitten harder, causing Milo to whimper in pain. The kitten struggled, trying to break free, but Mr. Gray didn't care. His grip on Milo tightened. The kitten's cries grew louder, but there was no one there to hear him. The room remained silent, empty, as the cruel act unfolded. Milo was just a small, helpless kitten who had no idea what was happening. His soft fur was no match for the rough, angry hands that held him. And in that moment, all Milo could do was cry. His tiny body shook as he tried to escape, but the more he struggled, the worse it became. The door to the classroom was still locked. No one would come. But something else was happening, something that would soon change everything. Outside, Lena was playing with her friends when she suddenly felt a strange pull in her heart. She stopped mid-laugh and looked toward the classroom. Something didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it, but she knew she had to go back. The fear in her chest grew as she ran back to the classroom door, breathless. She knocked quickly, but got no answer. There was no sign of Mr. Gray or the students. Lena's heart pounded as she tried the door handle. It was locked. She knocked again, louder this time. "Mr. Gray," she called, her voice shaking. There was no response, only the faint sound of something else, a soft, sad meow. Lena's heart raced as she pushed against the door. It creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. She didn't know what she was expecting to find, but it wasn't this. What she saw next would haunt her forever. Lena stepped inside the classroom, her breath caught in her throat. The faint sound of Milo's meows grew louder as she moved toward the back of the room. Her heart pounded with each step. She didn't know why, but something deep inside told her to be careful. When she reached the desk, her eyes fell upon the horrific sight. Milo was lying on the cold floor, his tiny body curled in pain. His fur was matted, and his breathing was shallow, as if every breath hurt. There was no sign of Mr. Gray. Lena's hands trembled as she rushed to Milo's side. She knelt down, gently scooping him into her arms. His body was so small and fragile, and he let out a soft, pitiful cry, as if he was begging for help. Tears filled Lena's eyes as she pressed him to her chest, her heart breaking for the helpless kitten. "What happened to you, Milo?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She looked around the room in confusion, wondering where Mr. Gray had gone. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned quickly, her heart skipping a beat, as Mr. Gray walked back into the room. His eyes were cold, emotionless. He didn't seem at all surprised to see her holding the kitten. "You should have stayed outside," Mr. Gray said quietly, his voice eerily calm. He took a step closer, his presence chilling. "It's not safe for you here." Lena's fear melted into anger. She stood up, holding Milo tightly in her arms, her eyes never leaving Mr. Gray. The kitten's mews grew weaker, and Lena could feel his pain. She knew she had to act fast. "You hurt him," Lena shouted, her voice shaking but full of determination. "You hurt Milo, and I won't let you get away with it." Mr. Gray's expression darkened, but Lena didn't back down. Her mind raced as she realized what she had to do. She ran out of the classroom with Milo cradled gently in her arms, heading straight to the principal's office. Her heart raced with every step. She had to make sure Milo was okay, and that Mr. Gray couldn't hurt anyone else. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, was shocked when Lena barged into her office, her eyes filled with tears. "You have to help him," Lena cried, her voice frantic. "Mr. Gray, he hurt Milo. He's been hurting him." Mrs. Thompson's face turned pale as she saw Milo, weak and trembling in Lena's arms. What happened?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Lena explained everything. She told her about how Mr. Gray had hurt Milo when the classroom was empty, and how he had been cold and cruel toward the kitten. Mrs. Thompson's eyes narrowed with anger as she listened. "Don't worry, Lena," she said softly. "We're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. I promise." Lena, still clutching Milo, nodded, her heart aching. She had done the right thing, but she couldn't stop thinking about how much pain Milo had endured. He didn't deserve any of this. The next day, Mr. Gray was removed from his position. The school launched an investigation, and his actions came to light. The evidence was undeniable. It turned out that Mr. Gray had been hiding his cruelty behind his calm demeanor for far too long. No longer would he be allowed to hurt innocent creatures. Milo, after a few days of rest and care, started to recover. His tiny body was treated with kindness and love, and he grew stronger each day. Lena, with the help of her parents, adopted Milo, vowing to give him the life he deserved. She would protect him and keep him safe forever. As the days passed, Milo's wounds healed, and his playful nature slowly returned. Lena could often be found curled up with him on the couch, his soft purring filling the room. Milo was safe. He was loved. And nothing, no one, would ever hurt him again. In the end, the story of Milo and Lena sent a powerful message. Never be afraid to stand up for what's right. Animals have no voice to speak for themselves, but we can be their voice. We can make the world a kinder place, one step at a time.